Two guys either side of 50 with one dream to achieve middle-aged sporting glory. This is the Missing Links Golf Show. Welcome back. This is episode 2 of the Missing Links Golf Show. How exciting to be back for episode 2. I'm Steve Hinks. Joining me is my good mate Andy Walker. And Andy, welcome to episode 2.
Hello, Mr. Hinks. How are you this week?
I am so good. What a week it's been, the launch of our brand new podcast. And I'm happy to say that we've got listeners. So hello to everybody out there who's been listening. So exciting to have you with us.
I am super excited.
Yeah, so for those of you that listened to episode 1, you would have heard a little bit of an intro about what we're here to talk about in this show. And of course, it is our dream to find some lost sporting glory in the twilight years of middle age. All is not lost. If we can do it, anyone can do it. So hopefully
maybe
we
a
can.
little way away at this point in time, but we're working on it.
It's a journey. We're at the beginning. We're at the starting line, and I think that's the point for this episode is starting lines. This is where we're beginning, the baselines or the starting lines. I kind of like starting lines because there's a little bit of a golf reference there. Your starting line of your shot. So anyhow,
we're on the first tee.
We're probably on the range actually at the moment. But I thought what we should do is to dive in a little bit more detail and actually have a look at where our games are at, because without doing that, we don't really know how to formulate a plan and how to identify the parts of our games that we need to improve if we're going to have any success on this journey. So, Andy Walker, how do you feel about diving into a bit of data and talking about our respective games today?
Yeah, good. Look, I did a little bit of work during the week just to do some analysis on where my game is, and look, let's face it, it's a long way from where I want it to be. However, in some areas,
is it a long way?
I guess it depends where you're comparing to. See, I always compare myself to when I was playing off scratch and +1. Now, is that a fair comparison? Yeah, probably not, given where I'm at in life. However, that's naturally where I'm going to go. I'm always going to compare myself to when I was playing my best. So, look,
feels a bit to me like a Bruce Springsteen song, "Glory Days."
Well, as we covered last week, I didn't have too many glory days after hitting shanks and the
we won't talk. So... We won't. I promise you won't talk about that shank in every episode. But we're 2 for 2 so far.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. But anyway, you're saying.
Yeah. So look, my game in some areas. Look, my current handicap's 4.4, which we covered last week. Now I do have a 2.8 round dropping off in my next competition round, so that may get a little bit higher depending on how I play. Don't want to go out and put too much pressure on myself in my next round, because it's obviously over 20 rounds where you get your handicap from. But yeah, 2.8 for the next round, so it may sort of go up a little bit before we see any improvement. However, I look at where I was 12 months ago, and I was actually off 4.4 12 months ago, so I've flatlined for the last 12 months from a handicap perspective. But that's also that I haven't really played that much either, so I can't really expect to improve when I'm not playing that much. So it's sort of it's gone from sort of the range is 4.3 up to 5.0. That's where we're at over the last 12 months. Now I look back 2 years ago and I was 3.0. So again, as we covered last week, I'm heading your way when it comes to handicap.
Yep. Which is fine. It's a good place to be. I enjoy my golf, so welcome aboard at any point to the other side of single digits.
Yeah. Look, I have to say, if I move out of single digits, I think we covered this last week, that it may be a short podcast. Yeah.
Okay, let's not let that happen. One other thing that I would say though is that in this flatline period that you've talked about in the last couple of years, you haven't necessarily had the pressure or the focus to really have that growth mindset and have that development mindset to improve the game. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this show, is to actually give ourselves that space where we really want to focus on improvement and figure out what works. Because I think for a lot of other people out there, you look at your golf game, you want to improve, but you just don't know where to start, how to analyze your current performance and how to develop a training plan to actually improve. So that's one of the things that we really want to do.
Well, that's it. And I haven't had a plan. I had goals and ambitions when I was playing seriously, but since then, since 1996, I've had no plan for golf.
Yeah,
it's been when I can play golf. For the first 15 years, it wasn't at all playing golf, but over the last 10 years, it sort of fitted in when life allows it to fit in, and that's never going to be conducive to getting back to your best golf. So looking at Arccos, and got to remember that I've only played 4 rounds with Arccos, so the data, we don't have a great sort of data set, so it may change dramatically over the next, say, 6 months when as I play more, as I get more data into Arccos. But when it comes to the measure of strokes gained, now I'm comparing to a scratch handicapper.
Yep.
Now, just a little bit about strokes gained and my understanding of strokes gained. For instance, if you're on a par 4, say it's a 400-meter par 4, and a scratch golfer expects to get into the hole in 4 shots, so they're expecting a par.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if a scratch golfer hits it, say, 250 meters down the middle of the fairway, and they've got 150 meters left into the flag, from 150 meters, they're expected to get up into the hole in 3 shots. Mm-hmm. Now, if you smoke it down the fairway 280, you're going to be in a better position than the scratch golfers. So your strokes gained might be 0.2 or 0.3 of a shot, because you've only got 120 meters into the flag. So it might be expected that on occasions you're going to make birdie more often than what the scratch golfer would from 150 meters. Whereas if you squeeze one 200 meters down the fairway, you're still only going to be 200 meters to the flag. So you might lose 0.5 of a shot to the scratch golfer. So it's all relative to the hole and the expected shots that it would take to get into the hole.
That's right. So what we're really talking about is that it's based on a very large data set, which is calculating against a benchmark, in this case scratch golfers, and that will be different if you're looking at it against 5 handicappers or 10 handicappers, or certainly different as well if you're talking about tour pros. But what it's really saying is that not all fairways in regulation are equal, because obviously proximity to the flag makes a huge difference in your scoring opportunities because of the type of club that you've got to hit on your next shot. So that's kind of, I think, probably as deep into strokes gained as we need to go right now, but maybe that's a topic for another time to go into it more deeply. Otherwise, we'll spend the whole episode talking about strokes gained.
Strokes gained, yep. So coming back to my strokes gained, so my strokes gained is minus 7.3 in relation to a scratch golfer. So for a round of golf, I'm losing 7.3 shots to a scratch marker. Now, if we break that down a little bit further, I'm losing 1.6 shots in driving, 2.6 shots in approach shots, 2.1 shots in my short game, and 1.0 shots in my putting. Now, that to me is a little bit surprising because I've always thought the strength of my game is my approach play and my irons. But as per Arccos, now, again, disclaimer, I've only played 4 rounds with, so this may change dramatically over the next 6 months, but I always thought my strength was my irons. I always thought my weakness was my putting, but that doesn't seem to be the case over the 4 rounds that I've played, which I found quite interesting.
It is interesting, but I think it also brings into question one of those topics that we were talking about outside of the podcast, which is around how many strokes genuinely can you gain putting versus how many strokes can you really gain ball striking. And I think we know that the answer to that is it flies in the face of conventional wisdom, where a lot of people talk about just practice your short game, practice your putting, practice your chipping. You actually stand to gain more strokes by improving the quality of your ball striking, and certainly from outside of 150 metres as well.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, I spent the vast majority of my time on the range hitting balls when I was playing seriously. Yeah, I felt as though that was always going to be my best chance to play my best golf. Now, unfortunately, I did that to the detriment of my short game and putting,
Yeah.
which again isn't the best way to go about it. However, the advantage that I've got now is that I've grooved a swing that I'm going to have for life. So it's that's been through not playing a lot, I can still hit it reasonably well when I put a good swing on it.
Yep.
When I put a good swing on it is the
and we all fight with that. We all battle that, obviously. We're not.
But also then coming back to Arccos and a couple of the or one particular measurement that I find quite interesting is my driver, which is over the 4 rounds, I've averaged 253 meters. Now, I look at some of the stats and I convert that across into yards, and that's 276.7 yards. And looking at the PGA Tour stats, I mean, well below average. The average is about 291 yards on the tour. But Aaron Baddeley hits at 278.7 yards. He's only 2 yards ahead of me on average.
Yeah.
And he's won a tour event in this. It was only 2 or 3 months ago that he won a tour event. So I'm still not far from that sort of length that will allow me to play some pretty good golf.
And that is not on the seniors tour, which really is the topic of conversation for this podcast. So I have always said distance is not your problem. You hit the ball a long way, and it's interesting because we'll get into this as the episode progresses, because you're using Arccos, as we've talked about before. I'm using Shot Scope. They're both similar technologies insofar as there's a little chip in the end of your golf club's handle which tracks where you're hitting the balls through GPS location on the course, and therefore tracks how many shots with each club, the distances of each club, and those sorts of things. Looking at your numbers versus looking at mine, and we'll look at those further into the episode, I actually feel like Arccos is a harder marker. And I don't see how that could possibly be true, but driving distances, average driving distances, I'm interested if this is, if when they're calculating those driving distances, if they do what's called a performance average, where they take the outliers out of that. So say you mishit one 160, because it hits a tree and drops down or something like that. Do they remove that out of the data set, or does that go in to pollute your average? Because the reason I mention that is my driving average, according to Shot Scope with driver, is currently at 250 meters.
Yep.
I know I don't drive the ball as long as you. So that to me is an interesting stat.
Yeah, look, and as we've sort of gone over, it might change a little bit. I mean, I look at my longest drive, which is 284 meters. So that's well over 300 yards. How that changes and ends up at the end of, say, 20 or 30 or 50 rounds. It's going to be interesting to see what that looks like. Because at the moment, I don't know. I sort of know how far I've always hit it. It's sort of been through trial and error on the golf course as to figure out how far I hit it. But I've never actually tracked the data in the way that Arccos does. So I've found it to be a really interesting journey so far. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what it looks like after 20, 30, 50 rounds.
Yeah, interestingly, don't expect it to change as much as you think. And the reason I say that is on my Shot Scope stats, I have the ability to sort the results by last round, last 5 rounds, last 10 rounds, last 15, or by calendar year. And just out of exercise, I looked at the last 5 rounds knowing that you had 4 in, and I compared that to my 2023, in which there's 38 rounds logged.
Yeah, right.
It's almost identical.
Okay.
So that, anyway, for what that's worth. So I think at 4 rounds, it's still a really usable data set. So anyhow, without sidetracking. So
Mm,
we've looked at
mm.
what those numbers are, and I guess what does that tell you for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities for the future?
Look, I mean, certainly, I mean, I've only identified a few strengths that I have, and I guess probably one of the non-statistical
Say
edges
that
that I
three
think I
times
have,
quickly.
yeah,
Yeah.
say that three times, is that I've been there and done that. I know what to expect. I've been to scratch before. So I know what it takes to be there. I know what it's like to play around a golf under par. So I know what to expect. We briefly mentioned before my previous practice. With the right opportunity, I think that's going to also help. I've grooved a swing. I know my swing pretty well. Yeah, there are some opportunities there to get some coaching. I've got a pretty good duck hook at the moment, which I need to
Nice.
get out of my swing. But
That's
that's
shaft, I'm telling you now.
well, I see the problem that how I used to play is, and I loved Jack Nicklaus play, and he always hit a fade. So I always wanted to hit a fade. And the way I got that fade was to basically come over the top.
Yeah.
And as I was coming through to strike the ball, I'd hold my left hand and hold the face open to get this
Yeah.
weak slice.
Yeah.
Now, the problem that I have is that now I'm trying to hit a draw. If you come over the top and you
It's not good.
release,
It's not
it's a
good.
duck hook every day of the week,
Yeah. Starts left, goes further
right?
left. It's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's my bad shot. So potentially there could be some shaft issues there, but I think my main issue with that duck hook is technical, and that is getting in behind the ball and getting on plane and swinging through rather than across and holding my left hand. So that's and I need to work on that, and that's begun. I actually went to the range yesterday and started working on that, and that was there were some good results when I swung in the way that I wanted to swing.
Yeah. So, as we talked very briefly in episode one about club fittings, and I don't want to derail this discussion to go down that path, but the thing with club fittings is it won't fix a bad swing. But what it will do if you've got clubs that aren't quite right, it will amplify certain things. And what is a what is something that I learned anyway, because also using TaylorMade driver previously, was that the shaft, the torque of the shaft, and the weight of the shaft, when you generating quite a lot of speed at the bottom of the swing, that was actually contributing to closing the club face at impact for me, and a similar outcome. So whilst I agree, it's the mechanics of the swing that's causing it. There's no doubting that, but I would say it's probably amplifying the issue when it raises its head rather than helping you, where maybe a different shaft in a different driver would alleviate that slightly, and you wouldn't have the duck hook so much as maybe a straight pull,
Mm.
if that's any better for you.
Well, if it doesn't sort of go one and a bit fairways across, then it's a good thing. If it's just in the left rough, then I'm happy with that. Because you get to obviously some golf courses, and I mentioned Magenta last week. If
Yeah,
you hit it, a long way left,
you're
you
gone.
just reload.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, go surfing. Yeah. So
exactly. So look, that's one thing that and we've talked about that, and that will be a process that I go through at some point. I I'm not at that point yet, but it will be part of the journey. Whenever it is that I get my next set of golf clubs, it will be a fully fitted set of golf
yeah,
clubs,
yeah,
and I've committed to that. So other strengths I think I have, and it's really sort of life experience. I'm 25 years older than what I was in 1996. So I've always been pretty competitive. It was drilled into me
so I
as
would
a
argue that
young
you're
bloke.
27 years older than what you were in 1996, just given that it's 2023.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, possibly,
It's
possibly.
splitting
It's
hairs,
it's,
but
it's
yeah, yeah,
pretty basic maths.
yeah.
I was sort of just rounding.
Okay,
Qu-
okay,
qu-
that's
qu-
good.
quarter of a century.
Yeah, very good.
So yeah, so I'm pretty competitive. My old man drilled into me as a young bloke that you never give up, you
Mm,
never give in, you
mm,
always do your best, and that's carried through pretty much everything that I've done in life. Um, Fortunately. Well, I'm very fortunate that my folks owned a health food store for 23 years. So I was always into fitness. I was always into health. And at age 50, just about to turn 51, a couple of weeks' time,
Mm,
I'm probably as fit and healthy as what I was when I was 30 to 35.
mm,
So I don't take any medications. I don't need to take painkillers. I know that during our last trip, the three blokes, including yourself, Mr. Hinks, that we travelled with, you guys could have opened a pharmacy with the stuff that you guys took,
yeah,
and
that
I
is
I
true.
don't take any of that. So I think that's been a real benefit and will be a real benefit is my fitness and my health at my age.
Yeah, and I think that's an important topic. I've spent the last week sort of reflecting on that as well, and I think there's definitely room for improvement on a personal note, and that's something that we'll get to in due course. But
Mm.
okay,
Look,
so
I think it's a balance. It's a balance between because you've got to live life. You
mm,
can't not live life. Uh, we both enjoy a glass of red or two.
mm,
Um, you can't give those things away and not live. So it's got to be a balance between the two. But I certainly think that physical fitness, certainly, and movement, whether that be resistance training or stretching or some form of movement, is critical to maintaining mobility and maintaining strength as we move into this next phase.
I think there's no doubting that flexibility is a big one that I think you start to lose when you're not doing the right exercises or you're not doing enough exercises or any exercises at certain times. So I definitely think there's something in that without a doubt. Okay, so any other sort of starting line reflections on your game?
Well, I sort of then move on to weaknesses. I think time is probably my biggest weakness in that I don't have a lot of it. I've got a business. I've uh, got young kids. As they get older, it's going to alleviate, and I'm going to have a lot more time. But at the moment, probably once a week is the most that I can really foresee myself putting into golf,
Mm,
certainly for the next 12 months. And then expectations, and we covered that before. I have probably too
mm.
high of expectations of where my golf should be at this point in time as to where it is. So I probably need to work on expectations a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's quite a big topic. Certainly on the golf course, it's a big topic. I don't think that there's a problem having high expectations in your preparation, in your training, all of those parts of the game. But when it comes to standing on the tee and standing over the ball, I think that's where high expectations actually can really bring you undone. And
Mm,
that's a very big topic that we're not going to dive into right now, but it's definitely,
mm.
that's definitely one that's relevant. Um,
Well, interesting. I just finished reading a book called Golf Psychology When Positive Thinking Doesn't Work by Jonathan Adler. And he says that you need to be optimistic when you stand over the golf ball, but realistic,
yeah,
which I think is a pretty good mindset to have. So you've always got to be optimistic. You've got to have confidence that you can hit the shot that you want to, but you've
yeah,
also got to be realistic as to where your game is at the moment.
yeah. And I think where that really comes in is that if you expect that you're going to pipe one up the center of the fairway off the first or off any tee box, and you don't, and you push it into the tree line or you just put it into the rough or something along those lines, like that's a shot you're gonna hit. That's an acceptable shot for not just amateur golfers but tour pros do it as well. So
Mm.
for us to do that and then beat ourselves up, and then where the problem really lies is when you get over the ball for your second shot and you're still cranky and you're still angry from the one before, and it's clouding your thought process, and it's
Definitely.
starting to inhibit your athletic ability as well to hit the next shot.
Mm.
That's where things
Yep.
really become, so it's that having a realistic expectation and then acceptance of the
Mm.
outcome, which is another thing. You go, all
Yep.
right, I've hit the shot, that's where it is, Dustin Johnson style, go find it, hit it again. Pretty simple game in Dustin's head. We love you, Dustin. But anyway, that can really help because you're letting go of the past and you're not playing because you can only hit any golf shot once. Very old cliche, but it is actually really true.
I agree.
Yeah.
So that pretty much covers sort of where I'm at in my golf game.
Mm.
That's my baseline. So let's have a look at your game, Mr. Hinks, and see where you're at in your self-assessment.
Yeah. So, it's interesting actually. What I might start doing, because I've had a look at my strokes gained against a scratch handicapper, which is I'll get to. I've also looked at it against a 10 handicapper, which is where I currently am at. So that's kind of, if you like, against the peer group. I also looked at it against 5 handicapper, which is as close as I can get in my stats to where you currently are at. And also it splits the difference between where I'm at and scratch, because otherwise it's a very, very big gap. So if we start at 10, and again, this is based on Shot Scope stats as opposed to the Arccos that you're using, and I do feel like my stats are slightly more flattering to me than yours are to you. Anyway.
So does Shot Scope take out those outliers?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, it does.
It does.
Right.
It does. And the other thing that it does is you can, I don't know if you can do this on Arccos, but say you've hit a drive into the trees and you need to bunt a 7-iron out onto the fairway. You can mark that shot as positional because you're not going for the green, and it will take it away from your, greens success rate for approach shots.
Right.
And it also won't use it for the calculation of average distances for the club. Otherwise, it throws your distances out. So I think it's actually a really smart function from that point of view because it makes your average distances with your club more accurate for full shots, not taking into account half shots. Anyway, so strokes gained against a 10 handicapper. Shot Scope is saying that I am currently gaining 2.66 shots on the field against my peer group, which is good. I'm quite happy with that. Otherwise, I'd be going in the wrong direction. So that's good. That's good.
Welcome to my life.
Yep. So anyway, how does that break down? So tee shots, I am gaining 2.59 shots on the field, which
that's good.
Is good, and I think that's probably because, not trying to be Bryson about this, but I think I probably drive the ball longer than your average 10 handicapper when you look at the stats. As we're saying, my Shot Scope's telling me my average driving length is 250 metres. I don't think it's quite that. Like I think when I get a hold of one, I'm hitting it in the 250 to 260 range. But often it's sort of in the 230 to 240 range because I would say I have more off-centre hits than what you do.
Look, it makes the game so much easier when you're driving well. If you're 250 or 260 or 270 down the middle of the fairway, or really anywhere on the fairway, it just makes the game so much easier than if you're driving it poorly. Certainly my best rounds were always when I was driving the ball well.
Absolutely. If you can't get off the tee box, then the hole is very hard and you're playing catch-up golf. I mean, as you know, the rest of our little society of missing links golfers, I would say comfortably I'm probably driving the ball longer than most of those guys. So that I think that's probably fair. We move into approach shots, and this is interesting. I'm gaining 0.08 shots on 10 handicappers in approach play. So
you're effectively a 10 handicapper with your approach.
With my irons, yeah. Which I should say that historically, the way I'd always assessed my game before I had data, and I think this is the importance of data. If anyone out there is thinking, is it worth say $300 or whatever it is to invest in Shot Scope or Arccos or something, I say it absolutely is, because there's a difference between thinking you know what's going on and actually knowing what's going on, and it's really quite telling.
Absolutely. And I think also a lot of golfers believe they hit it further than they actually do.
Oh, I had this conversation when I went for my club fitting. So when you go for your club fitting, one of the processes is that if you go for a driver fitting, obviously take your existing driver and you hit that and compare it. But for irons, you generally take a 7-iron. and you hit your 7-iron, and like a lot of the shaft calculations is based on your swing speed and your distances with the 7-iron. So I walked in, spoke to the pro, who said, "So how far do you hit your 7-iron?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to tell you how far I think I hit it. I'm going to show you my stats that I've collected, and this is how far I
Yeah.
actually do hit it." And he went, "Wow,
How'd that go down?
yeah." He said, "That's fantastic." He said, "But you know what? I'm going to put you on the TrackMan, and we're going to see what my stats tell you." It
Yep.
was to the number. It was
Right.
exactly the same number. And he loved it because he said every single person that comes in here for a fitting, they'll say, "I hit my 7-iron 160 meters. I put them on the TrackMan and they hit it 135. And he goes,
Yeah.
"You actually know how far you're hitting. That makes a massive difference." And I would never have known that beforehand. So it's
And
definitely
people
worth
wonder
it.
why the vast majority of the time they're short of the green in the hazard or in the bunker or in trouble short
Absolutely.
of the green.
It'll save you probably 4 to 5 shots around comfortably if you actually know your distances.
Mm.
Now, short game against 10 handicappers, I am losing 0.96 of a shot.
See, I thought your short game was better than that. I've
So did
always
I.
thought that you had a reasonably good short game.
Yeah, so did I. Apparently not. The data doesn't lie.
Apparently, you're 11 handicapper with your short game.
It would look that way. Putting, I'm gaining 0.95 of a shot putting. That's interesting as well because I rate myself as a particularly poor putter.
Interesting because I don't have, I think your putting has improved dramatically over the last 2 years to a point where I don't view you as a poor putter. So it's interesting your perspective of your game versus, say, my perspective of your game,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
we've played a
yeah,
reasonable amount together
yeah.
now, and how different that is.
I have worked hard on my putting and I have employed a couple of technical changes. There's a fantastic video by, I think it's Steve Johnston, a Scottish pro, who explains the anatomy of the forearm and the wrist of how to actually get a straight putting stroke. What that's done is following that technique, I've now been able to roll the line on the ball, which I could never do. I would always putt with a scrambled seam. Sorry for cricket references, but I've now been able to roll the line on the ball, which means that I can actually hit the putt on the line that I want to hit the putt. The question is, can I read the putt and can I get the speed right? And for me, speed is the biggest issue. But it has improved, yes, but I think there's this ingrained history within my mind of all of the years that I putted dreadfully, that's hard to mentally overcome as well. So I still sort of see things from that perspective. So that's the overview against a 10 handicapper. If I rate myself, or not rate myself, if I look at my stats against a 5 handicapper, some of these things shift, and when we get to scratch, it shifts even further, and it's interesting. So tee shots now against a 5 handicapper, I'm gaining 0.88 of a shot. I should say overall I'm losing 2.58 shots against 5 handicappers. So tee shots I'm gaining 0.88. Approach shots I'm now losing 2.08 shots. And short game, I'm only losing 1.58. That's compared to the best part of 1 against a 10 handicapper. So it's gone up by half a shot. Putting, I'm still gaining, but only 0.2. So still saying tee shots is my strength. Putting's reasonable, approach shots, so iron play approach shots, and short game is the struggle. Now, this is where it gets interesting, is when we move to comparing to a scratch handicapper. Now, and this is what I was saying, I feel like Shot Scope is being flattering to me and harsh on you because it was saying that you were losing 7.3 shots on a scratch
Yes.
handicapper.
Yep.
Shot Scope is saying that I'm losing 8.9 against a scratch handicapper.
Okay,
That's
so you're only 1.5 shots behind me then.
yeah. Which, how is that right? Because we know.
Well, I think it's the data set. I've only played 4 rounds, haven't played particularly well in those 4 rounds. So yeah, I think that's going to, certainly the strokes gained is going to change
Yeah.
over the next 6 months.
It would have to.
Maybe not the distances. The distances are probably, and I'm looking at those going, yeah, they look about right.
Yeah.
However, I certainly think the strokes gain data is going to change as opposed to where they are at 4 rounds.
And bear in mind, in this data set, I've got a couple of really good rounds for me, and they're like, I've got a 4.4 differential sitting in there, and a couple of 7s, and some of those sorts of things. So there are some, there's some good rounds that bring that down. Anyhow, the data's suggesting out of that minus 8.9 that I am against a scratch handicapper, I'm losing 2.04 strokes off the tee, which is not bad. Like that's indicating, with driver in hand, I'm not far off the pace
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
getting low, which is good. But this is where it's really interesting. Approach play, so iron striking, I'm losing 4.61 shots against
Wow.
scratch handicappers. So that's
Yep.
where it is. Short game I'm losing 2.0, and putting I'm only losing 0.25. So a quarter of a shot, which is nothing.
Which is nothing. Yeah,
Which is nothing.
absolutely nothing at all.
And that's where it brings in, if you were to put me against a scratch handicapper, you lob both of our balls on the green, 30 feet away, we're probably going to two-putt the majority of the time. I might have slightly more three-putt percentage than a scratch handicapper would, but it's not going to be a huge difference. But if you put us 150 metres out in the centre of the fairway, that scratch handicapper is going to hit the green closer to the pin every single time than I would.
Yep.
And that's what this is saying. So when I look at this, for me, I could spend a huge amount of time following traditional wisdom of short game practice, putting practice, and it's probably not going to do me a huge amount of good. But what this is saying really clearly is my ball striking needs to improve. Now I know that
your approach shots.
Yeah.
So if you move away from your driving, because I think your driving is really good. I don't. You can always improve, obviously, and you need to keep improving driving. But I think the opportunity is your approach play, your iron play.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of that data, and this is what Shot Scope does really well. I don't know if Arccos does this, but maybe it does. So what it breaks then down so off the tee, and it's looking at, I've got a fairway success percentage of 51%. Now this is based on 38 rounds of golf, so this is like there's a lot of data in here. 51% fairway success. That's against a zero handicap, a scratch handicap average of 50% fairway success. So there or thereabouts. What is interesting is I miss left 20% of the time. I miss right 23% of the time. There's a few percentage points that are actually missing there if you add those three up. But that's I'm sure that's a rounding error. But basically, it's not saying that there is a predominant left or right miss, that there are misses on both sides. So that's also interesting because that's saying that I can't necessarily aim to favour one side of the fairway or the other to limit the missing, because I've got the ability to push one and to pull one. So I don't know what to read into that, if there's anything that I need to read into that, or if that's kind of normal. But what I found is more interesting is that it breaks down your approach shots as well. So I have a 38% hitting the green success rate.
Yep.
Now, a scratch handicapper, according to the Shot Scope data, would hit the green 52% of the time with approach shots. So that's where I'm losing. So that's it says here a 13% differential, but when I did maths, 52 minus 38 was 14%. But anyway, that might not be, like, obviously that's a rounding issue. I'm having a bit of fun, but still, that's
obviously maths is your strength. I mean, 1996 to 2023.
I'm doing well on the numbers
27
tonight.
years, and
yeah. It's taken you that long to actually do the long subtraction to figure out that actually was correct. But interestingly, where do I miss? Now, you talked a little bit about this. So 11% of my missed greens or 11%, of my approach shots miss the green to the left. 8% miss the green to the right. So that's not telling you a lot. 5% misses the green long. And 37% of my approach shots fall short.
Right.
So
there's your opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, you read a lot of stuff online about that, and the simple answer people say is take more club. Okay? I don't believe that that's the answer. I think strike the ball better is the answer, because I can tell you, I know this from experience, that when I miss the green short, it's because I haven't flushed it. And not even flushed it, like I've had a horrible toe strike, or I've, caught it fat, or whatever the case may be. No amount of taking more club is going to make that any better. And in fact, having a longer shafted club in your hand is probably going to make your ball striking slightly harder. So I know that my distance is because I know my distance is because of Shot Scope. So I know that I'm picking the right club for the right distance. I'm just not hitting it well enough.
Or you could go back to your game improvement irons. That's the other thing you could do.
The problem with those, and just for anyone that's curious about why I made the decision to move away from game improvement irons into players' irons, the answer for that is very, very simple, and it's dispersion. You might get a little bit more distance out of the game improvement irons, but your dispersion is all over the shop. So if you actually want to be able to hit the ball where you want to hit it, not just hit it long, you do need to move into players' irons. But that is a whole other story for another time. So I think when I break that down, I look at it and I say my improvement area, whilst I do need to keep ticking away at the short game skills, and I know that things like having a reliable up and down, that's really important to minimise the damage. But for me to really improve, it's going to be ball striking that I'm going to have to focus on, without a doubt. So
Yeah, and I think both of us are in the same boat there. I mean, you look at my strokes gained data and it's minus 2.6 in approach play. So we've effectively got to work on the same things to get to where we want to be.
Yeah, which is good. So I think this has been a really useful discussion because we've been able to break the games apart to figure out, well, okay, where do we, if we're going to improve, where do we need to spend our time? Where do we need to focus? Because we have identified we don't have much time. Like you're obviously very time poor for getting out to practice. I can practice a bit in the evenings, but I actually really struggle to then play competitive golf on the weekends because of my family commitments then really kick in at that point. So it's kind of similar but different. But I think what we need to do from here is we actually need to really spend the next week digesting this data, going away and thinking about it, and probably coming back to next week's session with our training plan, our development plan, and that's going to be where it gets, brings it to the next level where we actually make some commitments. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, and I think part of also what I need to do, because I'm still very green with Arccos. Obviously, you've had Shot Scope for a number of years now, so you know the system pretty well. I can see the summary data within Arccos, but I haven't had the chance to really delve into all of the detailed stats to what it gives me. And I'm sure it gives me all of those greens and regulations, proximity to the holes, but I just haven't delved into that level of data as yet. But in saying that, again, as we've covered, it's only 4 rounds. So how close that would be is questionable.
It'll change. But like I say, it's probably not going to be as volatile as what you might think because, your performances, and certainly as a low single-digit handicapper, your performances are going to be relatively stable. Like you might put in a played to 2.5 round versus a bad round for you might be something like a differential of 7 or 8. It's probably not going to be massive differences.
Looking at the rounds. Just looking at the rounds that I've put in, I've had 5 over, 6 over, 9 over, and 11 over. So, they're not great, and that's not the level that I see myself play or what I should be playing at.
Yeah, and that probably explains why our variance to scratch is not as high as what I would have expected it to be. So,
yeah. But again, there are going to be some good rounds that I play that are going to change that data, and it's going to have an impact. And I'm going to be really interested to see how that works over the next 4 to 6 months as the data set increases and becomes a lot more consistent, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, look, these numbers give us the markers for success and development as the show progresses, because what I wouldn't want to do is just to look just at handicap and say, has my handicap gone up or down? Like, that's a result, but that's not something that you work on. Whereas we, things that we're working on absolutely can be centered around your greens hit through improvements in ball striking, fairways hit, improvements in the strokes gained through driving because you're using the stack, you gain some distance. Those sorts of things are actually real metrics that we can look at. And, both of us with careers in business, we love a good measurable outcome.
Absolutely.
Because, what you measure, you manage. And I think this is a good example of that. But rather than on those other sort of scoring outcomes that are a little bit more a result of other factors as well.
Well, it's interesting coming back to the stack, because I'm just looking at my stack data now, which I've got a lot more data in the stack than what I do in Arccos. So my average driver speed, it measures driver E speed, is 106 miles per hour. So I look at that and go,
That's pretty
that's
good.
not too bad. I mean, I look at some of the swing speed data, and this is coming from 2022, but the the Champions Tour, for instance, is 106 miles per hour on average.
So
I'm right on that average.
right there.
Whereas the PGA Tour is 113.
Yeah, and we don't need to be there. So what you're saying, and this is exciting, is your driver speed is around about the same as Miguel Jimenez.
Yes.
Outstanding. My favourite golfer of all time.
Yes. My warm-up routine is slightly different to his.
couple of less stretches, a couple of less cigars, a couple of less glasses of red before stepping onto the first.
Yeah.
Nevertheless,
it's been a long time since I had a cigar.
Yeah.
A long time.
Yeah. And probably will continue to be a long time.
Correct.
I think that's about it for tonight. I think for everybody, thank you for listening. I genuinely hope that discussion of some of these stats maybe gives you the push to dive into understanding your own game just a little bit more. It's so valuable, but also just challenging all of the cliches of golf development that, you drive for show, you putt for dough. Okay, there's truth in it, but you know what? You hit your approaches for the big checks at the end of the day. I think that's, greens in reg is the one traditional metric that still holds true. Fairways in regulation, really irrelevant. Number of putts per round, I can lower the number of putts per round by missing every green and chipping it close, but it doesn't really tell you the scoring story. So there's a lot in there that kind of doesn't hold water as much as once we thought it did. But our challenge, Andy Walker, over the next week is writing our development plans, making some commitments that we're going to hold each other to.
Yep.
Possibly putting some prizes and or penalties on the line for adhering to some of those as well. So that's something to think about. But for everyone out there listening, please, if you haven't already done so, give us a review. We're live on Apple Podcasts as well now, which is exciting. Chuck a 5-star rating on there, give it a review, tick the auto download box, follow the show, get on the Missing Links Golf Show on Facebook, drop us a line, ask a question. We'll happily answer those in future shows. But once again, thank you so much all for listening, and we're going to take it out with our banging theme song. So strap yourself in, Andy Walker, here it comes.
Great. See you next week.